Hello YouTube, my name is Don and I wanted to show how I repaired my MacBook Pro early 2015 edition. So this laptop was water damaged. It was sitting in a backpack and there was so much rain that it soaked through the bag and was able to get into the laptop and disable the system. So I used my iFixit kit and already took out the Pentalobe 5 screws. So once I actually got into here, I found out that everything seemed to be okay. It was mainly the battery that was having the problems. So once I was able to clean up the board and get everything good to go, I was able to put it back together and plug up the MagSafe charger, and everything just worked. It detected that there was no battery in place, so it went ahead and decreased the speed to about 800 megahertz. Once I plugged the battery back in and started it up, it detected that it was a faulty battery, needed to be replaced immediately. I went ahead and ordered one off of eBay from somebody that had a damaged system and plugged their battery up. Everything seemed to work fine. So I'm going to show you all the different spots that I checked and how I actually figured out what was getting some sort of corrosion on it, and the spot that I cleaned up, and we'll go from there. So a lot of the systems on how to take this apart I checked on iFixit website for, just to make sure everything was going well. I did pick up some Arctic Silver. Wanted to get that in for the processor just because it's very rare I take apart my laptop, and some thread locker. Since most of these had some sort of thread locker on them already, I'm going to go ahead and put another dab on it just to secure everything. But your battery would actually sit here. Now, how I got this off was I took a headache bag that you can put in the microwave, and I went ahead and microwaved it for a few minutes just so it got hot enough to the touch, and I just set it on the battery and let it kind of heat up the battery a little bit, which would get rid of the adhesive qualities of the glue that they used. And then I just used a credit card and pried it up. Took quite a while. I would say it took probably about 45 minutes to get everything up. I saw another way where people were using twine or fishing line and sliding it under there, but I didn't want to risk the possibility of damaging any of the boards here. Most of the screws inside are going to be a Torx T5. My suggestion with the iFixit kit is it comes with this nice cap for the toolkit. Put them in here and then put a label off to the side so you know exactly what goes in which bag. Some things to keep track of. You'll want to make sure when you're taking off your heatsink that you don't damage the processor underneath. You've got your hard drive here, your fan, your radio, then you've got various connections floating around here. I did pop off one of the pins on the back of one of the connectors for the piece that's under this, the speaker connection. So just be careful. I'm just using electrical tape just to make sure that none of the wires pull themselves apart before I get Loctite everywhere. So the corrosion I found was actually on the reverse side of this board. So once I get that out, I'll show you up a little closer. So one thing I just did to make it easier, I went ahead and labeled each one of these spots. So that way on a sheet of paper, I could put down exactly where everything's going to go and just drop them into that same cubby, and then that way I'll know exactly which ones I need to grab next. one thing you might want to make a note of is where all these connections are going, so that way you can make sure that they all go on back just the way you took them off. Now some of the connectors might have tabs on them. If you just put your prying tools into the crook of it, you can easily slide it out. Some others just need to be popped out, and you can do it just by easily getting underneath the cable itself and just applying just a little bit of pressure, and it will come out. This is one of the speakers over here. Now with the speakers, you'll have to be careful because each screw is slightly different. So the one back here is going to be smooth, this one's going to be long, and this one's going to be short. So as you can see, there's a big discrepancy there. And same thing for the other side here. And again, this one's the one that just pops out. So if you need to replace these, they're pretty easy to replace. Now the MagSafe board on this side here, there's a little notch so it always goes into the same spot. This one's actually pushed in, so you'll have to pry that one out to get this out. But if you short this board, and you'll be able to actually tone it out with the multimeter, which I'll show you in a minute. And that's your MagSafe board. So these two will give you the same, these two will give you the same, and that's your data port. The reason for that is so you could plug it upside down, and so there's no real upside down to it. You can plug it in either way and it will still charge. Those same pins correspond to these pins. You have the 2, 2, and 1. And if you just do a basic test for continuity, So the first thing you could check to see is if this port here is bad itself. So you can see that these two pins are linked, and these two pins are linked. You go to your next pin. So again, those two pins should be linked and nothing else. And then your middle pin should not be linked with anything. So when I brought it to a store that said that they can fix it, they said this board was bad. When I tested it, it was fine. So they wanted to charge me like $100 for this little board. You could find it much, much cheaper. With the radio, if you're going to take it out, take your time and just slowly pop each one of them. And make a note, that one's going to be your longest, that one's going to be your middle, this one's going to be your shortest. You might also want to take a picture just so if you mess up the wires, you could easily get them back into place. Now this will take a little bit of force to get out, but you're going to want to just slightly lift up and pull straight back. Otherwise you could damage the board. Alright, so at this point we should have all of our connections decoupled. So every one that has an opening now will need to be replugged. The one thing we need to do next is, if we're going to be taking out this piece, which is your fan assembly, which I'm not going to take out for this one, but you have a little connector right here, and that one again is one that just kind of pushes out. Just flip up the back tab and push it out. So I'm not, well, it looks like I will have to unscrew it. So screw that, I'll do it. And one thing to note with the interface board here, you have a screw here and you have a screw here. This special screw will actually go, will have your piece go underneath, and then your heatsink will go on top of that, and then it will screw in. So you're going to have two screws in this one spot. So this little screw will go in with the heatsink. So I'm going to put this in with the heatsink screws. Now once I take it out, you'll see that there's another screw underneath there. Now your heatsink is actually has these little rubber bumpers on them that just peel off, and it will reveal your screw underneath. and the heatsink will just lift off. So when you clean the heatsink, you're going to want to clean all this goop off. Use standard rubbing alcohol with something greater than, say, 81% alcohol. You're going to want to do the same thing here. You're going to want to clean off as much as you can with that because you're going to put the new stuff on, and we'll show that a little bit later. So over here you have a new Torx screw here, and that's how your heatsink actually went on, is it screws into a screw. I like Torx 8. So what I found was the pads here, you can kind of see a little burn, blackish. And what I did was I took a nail and I just made sure that that was good and clean. And then I did the alcohol on that. The other thing I found was around this area, there was a white powdery substance. I would consider that corrosion. So what I did was I liberally applied the alcohol, scrubbed it with a good new brush, and got it all cleaned up. And then once I did that, I put everything back together after everything dried, and it powered up with the power cord. And that's when I figured out that the battery might be the one that's dead, and went ahead and ordered that. So the last thing I'm going to take apart here is the backer to the trackpad, and that's actually even smaller than the Torx 5. That one's a Torx 3. And this one has quite a few screws. You're going to have 3 here, 2, and 2. And I'm not actually going to put these in the tray because I'm going to do a dab of Loctite to these right after I take them out. Now I did the investigation with a magnifying glass and a light, so that way I can easily see what was going on with all the boards. And the one thing I found, which was on the main logic board, was just that there was the corrosion and a couple of the burn marks. So the burn marks kind of scared me just because I didn't know if that would have traveled anywhere else. But it did not seem so. It seemed very isolated to the board itself that connects in with the battery. I tested the batteries, and the batteries seemed to be perfectly fine. So I looked under here for any kind of signs of moisture, and I didn't see any. So at that point, I was starting to put everything back together. I didn't go any further because this is pretty well sealed up on the top, so I wasn't too worried about that. So at that point, plugged everything up, everything worked. So yeah, just take your time and unscrew everything. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this with some Loctite and put it back together. I might speed this section up just because it's going to be excessively boring. But I'll come back with some thoughts afterwards. So with the thread locker, I just clipped it big enough that I can get a toothpick in the piece, and then I'm putting the screw on the end of my screwdriver, applying a little bit to the thread, and then screwing it in. Now these boards are a little bit tricky to get back in because they have these tabs. So the tabs will stick out just above the line. So what I found is kind of going it at an angle and then having your tool available to kind of push them down. And then just line up your holes. Now these two, this one's your special one, and this is where your actual fan is going to screw into. So you're not going to have a screw for this one right away. Same thing with this board. You're going to have the little pieces coming out here that are going to try to stop you from easily putting it in. Now the one thing about the main logic board here, you're going to want to make sure that all of your connections are in, because if I tighten this down, this connection's actually underneath it. I just wasted all my time. Now I have to unscrew it and do it all over again. So make sure all of your connectors are on the top side. And then line up your screws like normal. So I'm going to get this all screwed in, and then I will go ahead and clean off that CPU, because we're going to need to eventually go ahead and put the new bead of thermal paste on there. For the main logic board, I'm not going to screw everything down tight just yet. I'm going to go ahead and get them all in there first. Now for the fan, it's very important for the airflow. You're going to want this as tight up against the back as possible. Okay, now that my fan's in, I'll go ahead and tighten them down. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the new battery. So the new battery is just going to sit just like the old one. It's going to go right here. So what I'm going to do, so since I don't have the glue that it came with, I went ahead and bought just some regular double-sided sticky foam tape. I'm going to try to see if that works. Now, since we don't want to activate the battery ability just yet, we're going to actually put something underneath here so it doesn't accidentally connect. While we go ahead and continue reconnecting everything. I'm just going to use this sticker from my old one to secure it. So far, that seems like it should work. Hopefully it won't be too thick. We'll find out. Since I broke the back of that tab over there, I'm going to go ahead and put some tape on that one. So if I hear any rattling, I will go in and add some more tape underneath some of these, but it should be fine. That should hold it. Alright, so at this point it's just the heatsink that we're going to be worrying about. So let's try to get off as much of this paste as we can. So I'm using 91% alcohol, and I'm just going to use some cotton swabs and take care of it. So one of the few things that we have left to do, now that everything is dried off, is put our thermal paste down. I would recommend using a business card or something like that to kind of spread it around. You want every area of the silver covered. You don't have to worry about getting it perfect. As soon as you put on the heat sink, that will spread it out even more. Now once you place this, you don't want to be shaking it around too much or maneuvering it. So kind of get it into place first and then just drop it down. That's it. Just like some of the other ones, let's not tighten this down all the way right now, but let's get everything in and then tighten it down. So at this point, we just need to put back on the stopper, the bumpers. Okay, so looking at my tray, I noticed I only have number 2 and 3 left. Number 2 and 3 are my case screws. So at this point, I'm ready to plug in. So I'll go ahead and connect the battery. So now just double checking, all my screws should be screwed in. Nothing should be in my kit. I have my covers put down. Speakers are back in, batteries in, all the cables are attached. So at this point we can go ahead and close it up. So one thing I forgot to do was put this piece back. And so this piece just lays over here and these tabs right in a groove. Then there's 2 snaps that your case back will snap into, and they're here and here. So before I go ahead and Loctite these down, go ahead and flip it over and see if we can power it. So now that we're all done with this, let's go ahead and put on the back. Line up your holes, and then you're going to push down for those clips. And then go ahead and put in your screws and flip it over and turn it on. So these are the longer ones. These 2 are going to be your short screws. So those short screws are going to go in the back. I'm not going to show me putting all these in, but I'll come back after I'm done. Well, now that we've got all of the screws back in, let's turn it over and see if it'll power up. Alright, so we're powered up. So the next thing I would recommend doing is checking all your ports. You know, make sure that, because we took this board out, make sure that all of these can be plugged in. Make sure everything's working. Check headphones. Come over to your other side. Check your HDMI port, your SD card, your other USB. Just make sure everything works. So, yeah, wasn't hard. The tools, I didn't have anything, so everything all told together cost me about $150. The battery was about 40 bucks on eBay. The iFixit toolkit was the most expensive thing. So I would say, you know, give it a try and see if you can repair it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.